right, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. If anybody trickles in, that's totally fine. This is a program at the St. Louis Public Library brought to you by Creative Experience. I am Sam. I'm going to be doing all of these 4 parts in this series. If at any point you aren't able to make one, that's totally fine. It's also going to be posted to our YouTube. I didn't manage to get the post on our social media up until I think it's going to end up posting tomorrow, which is no problem. It's just going to kind of be people are going to be able to go back and watch. But like I was kind of saying at the beginning of this, a lot of people are going to be able to backtrack because this isn't a super difficult one. Oh, it looks like we do have one more person. So I'll admit. Okay, great. So I was just getting started, just giving the rundown on This is Creative Experience, and I'm going to be doing this 4-part series on how to make a 3D character. All of this will be posted to the YouTube after, which I've said probably like 5 times that Jess has heard. Sorry about that. But if you're wondering why the program is being recorded, it's just because we want to try and get as many people that are able to use the resource as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I just need to share my screen, and hopefully I do this right, because I know I had issues with it last time. But let's see. Okay, I think now I can be heard. I know that I have to like pause the audio sharing on the screen sharing, which is fine because it's just a little, what's the word I'm looking for? PowerPoint. Okay, so, and if anyone has questions, you can go ahead and put them in chat. Dylan, I know, is kind of like doing double duty right now as the moderator and also working on the floor. So if he does not see your chat in time to alert me, sorry about that, but we will answer all the questions once I'm done with the presentation. And then also once I'm done with the presentation, I'll probably do a little bit of walkthrough in Blender as well. Okay. So this is part 1 of Create a 3D Character. This is drawing a reference. So this is very important to actually getting into doing 3D modeling. Doing 3D modeling is a lot different than doing than just drawing. You kind of have to consider a lot of things. There's not very much that you can hide behind. Like a lot of the times, you know, if you are drawing a character who's, you know, posed like this, you know, they have their hand in front of their face, you just draw the hand, you know, you don't need to draw the eye. When you're doing 3D modeling, you'll usually do everything. And that's good and bad, you know, because there is information there that isn't normally there, or that wouldn't be there if it was 2D. You then can like repose your character, or you can animate them and not have to, you know, redraw that part. So if you were doing an animation where someone was running and the legs cross over each other, if you were doing it in 2D, you'd have to erase the back leg every time it crossed with the front leg. Whereas if you're doing it in 3D, you just have to pose the camera in the correct way. So it definitely has some like give and take to it. But it is still important to have that fundamental of drawing and understanding character design to have something that looks good when you're doing 3D. So if you have like a good understanding of drawing or proportions or anything like that, it's definitely really helpful. But you can also, you know, push the boundaries and make your character very like exaggerated and lean into it and make it kind of feel purposeful. So we're going to talk a little bit about all those things today. So the first thing you want to do when you get into wanting to make a 3D character is brainstorming. And a lot of you guys might already have done that part. You might have already kind of come up with an idea of what you want. But also sometimes it's really hard to think about what you really want to do. You just know that you want to make a 3D character, and maybe you know, oh, I want to make this for this reason. And that's always a good way to think about it, is a reason that you want to make this. If you just want a really cute character to print out as a 3D print and sit on your desk, that's a very different, thought process than I want a 3D character that I can maybe make an animation with, or I want a 3D character that I can use as my avatar when I'm, in a VR space, or any other things like that. They're all going to have different ways that you want to approach them, and they'll have different reasonings, and it'll kind of lead you in different directions. But if you don't have a specific purpose, you can always just go like idea first. So I really like to go on Pinterest and find different inspirations that'll kind of like give me ideas of what I want to do. I kind of have a couple things here. I've got some things that are just kind of like the vibe of what I'm going for. I want it to be very fall themed. I thought, since I wanted to do Halloween themed, but then I was like, we're starting this before Halloween and ending it way after, so it's not going to really make as much sense. So I just kind of was going with a fall theme, since it's going to be through the next month or I guess 2 months that we're working on this. I think we're ending, because it's every 2 weeks and there's 4. So we're ending sometime in late November. But I've got a couple of things here that have like color palettes that I really liked. I really liked the dress on this little pumpkin girl. I had so many pumpkin things in my Pinterest sheet, and then I ended up doing nothing with pumpkins when I actually got to the end of it. And you'll kind of see my ideation stages and everything. But I knew I wanted something very fall themed, and maybe a little bit like forest themed, nature themed. And I really liked the shapes and the shape language that the character in this bottom right hand corner had. I liked that she was very soft, but she had very angular features on her, and her hair was very like triangular, and her hat was very angular, but there was like mixes of like circles and triangles. And shape language is something really important when it comes to characters. It makes you kind of like, it's always bad to, obviously, for real people, have assumptions based on just how they look. But when you're, dealing with an animation or a story or a movie where you need to know who this person is immediately, because you only have an hour with them or 5 minutes with them if it's a short film, you really want to be able to kind of get an idea of who this character is right away. And then it's also nice to, like, if you give the idea that this character is one way, you can kind of like subvert that later. Or combine two things, like play with something that's very like hot and cold, or, combining those things in different fun ways. Okay. And then the next thing you want to do is to start sketching. There's plenty of ways that you can go about doing this. The example that I showed, I actually did on a tablet on Procreate. You could very easily do this in Photoshop, which is something we have available for free at the library. One big tool that I ended up using was the symmetry tool. That's going to be in most art programs. It's in various different places depending on which program you use. But usually just, typing in like whatever the program's name is, and then symmetry tool or symmetry or mirroring or anything like that should give a good result to kind of tell you what would be the best option. And then also, if you are going to do it on paper, which is totally, for this for this part of the program is totally fine. You can actually just draw it straight. You don't have to do it symmetrical. Most like people, so if you're going to do like a human or even just a humanoid character, most of the time people are symmetrical. And then there's also little differences. So you'll see like I do most of mine with the symmetry tool on, and then I'll go in and add an extra little thing that kind of balances it off, like makes it a little asymmetrical. But if you are doing it in paper, you can also do it the old school way of sketching it and then putting it on top of any kind of light box. If you don't have access to a light box, even just putting it up to like a screen, like on top of a phone screen or anything like that. Obviously, don't get in trouble and put it on a screen that you shouldn't be and mark it up or anything. But having like that light to reference your under sketch to kind of, you know, mirror it yourself is something that you could definitely do on paper. So here is a sketch process of what I kind of was working on. I didn't want to bore you guys with the entire thing of, you know, taking the whole hour just to sketch this stuff out. So I'm just going to kind of play the video, but I'm also going to pause it at certain points to kind of like point out what's going on and kind of things that I was thinking about while I was working on it. Okay. Okay, so I'm working with the symmetry tool here. As you can see, it's going on both sides as things are coming out. One thing you'll see is as I'm starting with these very big shapes. So a very big round head, a kind of like big middle section that I kind of like turn into two smaller circles. But then I flatten it out then again into a triangle. So this character, I kind of just went, there's a couple different basic shapes that you can make a character with, and I'll show you those a little bit at the end with the tips and tricks. I went mostly with circles and triangles, but you can also do squares. And it talks about it a little bit later, the different meanings behind them and kind of what they make you think about. But for this character, I went with lots of round shapes and then harsh angles right next to them. So one thing that you'll see me mess with a million times during this sketch is I probably redo the hands 4 or 5 times. It was maybe necessary and maybe not necessary. So what this is this is not going to be a completed illustration. You can absolutely make it a nicely done drawing and use it as an illustration. But you don't want it to be too posed. You want it to be like in a pretty like either relaxed or arms spread out. I did mine with mine down. I always have, whenever I do my references, for some reason I always have them at more of like an A pose rather than a T pose. So those are you'll maybe hear those referenced in other character animation things, especially in 3D. An A pose is more of the arms down. A T pose is going to be the arms out. But both of them are basically just what you do to get your character in the program. And then once you've got them like that, you can then rig them, which we're going to talk about rigging in our last session. And once you've rigged them, then you can kind of like pose them and they'll have little, essentially they're called bones in them that you can then move things around and pose them. But if you have them all, you know, like tight like this, sometimes it's hard for the program to differentiate where it wants you to pull from. So it'll then start attaching like the legs to the hands, and you try and move one thing and everything is just moving with it. So it's not going to move right. So if you do something in here, if you're having issues, you're struggling drawing something, make sure that your finished product is just something you understand. So if you want to make something that doesn't quite look right, but you know that once you get in the program, you can move things and adjust things, then that's totally fine. So I probably did not need to redo the hands 3 or 4 times. I probably could have just done them once and then just made hands when I got into the program. But I was being a little bit of a perfectionist, and even though my final product is not perfect, I kind of just redid them a couple times. So you'll see that here, and right there you'll see that I adjusted the proportions. So this is what it was looking like before, and it was just a little too long for what I was looking for, and I shrunk it down right here because I knew that I wanted to have a very like short body and then a large, like something off the top of the head. And you'll see that I start sketching those out. I loved this design that I was going with, and I completely scrapped it and ended up going with something different. So I was originally going to have these sort of little like pumpkin buns on her head. But then I decided it wasn't working, and I liked how these pointed ends coming off of her hair were. So I kind of turned those into more of like pigtails. And obviously in real life, when you see someone's pigtails, they're not going to be coming straight off their head with, you know, sort of like a triangle shape. But that's where you can kind of play with shape in what you're doing. So kind of exaggerating things and making things a little bit more drawn out or a little bit rounder than they would normally be. And I mean, also if you look at like her feet, which I'll be adding some shoes in a minute, people's feet don't look like that, you know, they're not that like round and small. But it's a way to kind of convey who this character is and like, you know, what they're doing and that kind of stuff. And you'll see I'm adding and subtracting different things that kind of make sense or don't make sense with what I'm doing. And yep, you'll see here right at the end, and I want to make sure I show that. When I finally do the hands again, I finally decide, you know what, I don't care what way her hands would be laying in this picture. I just want them to be easy for me to understand in the 3D modeling. So I ended up just having them out like this, and that worked perfectly. So after you get through your sketching, the next step is going to be, let me see if I can go to the next one. The next step was going to be figuring out if this silhouette makes sense. So this is another thing I'm going to talk about in the tips and tricks, but as you can see here, her silhouette is pretty clear. I feel like, you know, if I did not know who this character was, obviously I wouldn't know who it was, but you know, she's got that pointy bit here, the big round thing on top, the kind of round bottom shape. I'd be able to pick her out of a lineup with similar looking characters because her silhouette is pretty clear. And now obviously it's a pretty basic silhouette because it is not in a fun pose or anything gestural. It is just a reference. But it's always nice to kind of just like fill in your character, see what their silhouette looks like, and kind of see if you want to adjust anything, because it also kind of makes you understand like where the proportions are and if the proportions don't look right to you. It's also helpful for when you start doing your turnaround, which I'll show in a second, because when it's filled in like this, it's a silhouette, so you can't tell whether they're facing forward or backward. So sometimes it's easier to understand or think about what the backside of your character will look like if you are just filling this in. And I'll kind of show you that when we get into the turnaround part. Okay, so now into the turnaround. So I've also got a video of me working through the turnaround. So you'll see here, I just pull the front version of my character over, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to erase everything on the inside. So I started with the face here. I erased all of the face, and I just replaced that with what the back hairline would look like. You'll still see here that like the hat is not correct because it's still as if it were facing in this direction, but when you flip it the other way, it's going to be that direction. So after I get done with the hairline, then I bring down where the bottom of the hat is. And I don't know if I do it, I don't think I do it on the back view, but on the side view, you'll see that I do put some guidelines so I can see where things are supposed to end so that they make sense and it translates across it. So here you'll see, here's where I did the silhouette thing because I was getting very confused about how to draw these shoes and these feet from the back angle. And it was frustrating me, and it was awful. So I filled in the silhouette and I kind of started to understand. I was like, oh, okay, you know, the soles would be here, just because it's easier to envision it now. I'm like seeing the silhouette and I'm able to be like, oh, okay, that's what that looks like. And this is also a time where if you have those references that we kind of talked about getting on Pinterest, it would be a good way to, you know, time to look at those. If you have any references of things that usually you have a difficult time drawing, that's also something to include. So on my brainstorming sheet, on this PowerPoint, I think I only really showed the like the aesthetic parts of it. But rest assured, there was tons of like character turnarounds and all that kind of stuff. And I think I actually did make a purely character turnaround Pinterest board, which I will after this, after the program, I'll send out, just so you can get a kind of head start on looking at different references. A lot of the time people suggest referencing from life, but I think when it's your first time, especially working on something, especially because we're then going to translate it into 3D later, being able to reference someone who has done this art before and who has done these drawings in these different perspectives is definitely something that's beneficial to look at. And then also the tried and true way, if you can't figure out something, just take a picture of yourself doing it or have someone take a picture of you. So if you really just cannot picture what it would look like of these feet from behind, just have someone take a picture of you. It's the easiest way to figure stuff out. Because sometimes you can look for hours and hours and try and find the correct reference and you still can't find it. So sometimes you just have to find it in real life. So on here, I finally got the shoes done and I start adding some details to the back. So she's got a little bow there. And you'll see a couple of things, the difference between these two. And I've put in these guidelines, which I'm now looking at are a little bit crooked, but that's okay. We'll adjust it when we get into the program. This is mostly just, so we can see what we're doing. One thing you want to keep in mind is right on these little lines here, I basically just put down lines across the page wherever there was important things that I knew I would have to show on the side view. So I've got this top line here is where the brim of the front of the hat is. And then this line here is where the bottom brim of the hat is on the back. So I can kind of see how it would need to be angled. So it needs to go from up here to down there. And then I'm not sure, I think if I put it in full screen, you should still be able to see it. I also included, like the bottom of the character, where the hands are sitting, where the elbows are, and then you'll see there's a ton of lines on the face, and that's kind of important, especially on the side view, to kind of figure out where those features are. And this is where I think it's going to be really important to give a look at those references that I'm going to send out. Or you can also find your own. You can 100% just like type into Google character turnarounds or character design references or anything like that. Just because sometimes it's hard to envision a character going in 3 dimensions. A lot of the times people will end up, when they're drawing a character, even if they're drawing the same one, sometimes they end up drawing them completely different every time because they're not keeping the proportions the same. So maybe their nose is so much lower the next time, or their eyes are so much higher, or something like that. But with 3D, that is the good part about it, is it stays consistent. You've got one model and you just pose it and you make it do whatever you need it to do. So characters tend to stay much more on model because there is just one model. When you're looking at 2D animation, they kind of have to have a couple different models. They have obviously the front view, the side view, 3/4. If you would like to make 3/4 views on this as well, be my guest. It is definitely very helpful to get that extra view when you're checking your work in 3D. However, it is definitely a little bit more difficult. So if you do have experience with working on 3/4 view as well, definitely go for it. But I'm going to go ahead and press play and let the work show a little bit here. Basically what I'm doing right now, though, is kind of trying to figure out how far out some of these things are going to be, how far out they go. So definitely looking at references can be super helpful. So you'll see here, I started off with the head ending like here, and I was like looking at it and I'm like, this is definitely not right. Her head looks so flat. But then I kind of brought that out with the hair a little bit, brought it out with the hat a little bit. And the one good thing is with digital art is you'll see here that I kind of went in with the warping tool and just brought it all up a little bit. I just wanted all of it just to come out a little. So that's what I was doing. Right there, as you can see, it goes between the two things. And another thing that I did for the side view is I ended up just not including the arms. The arms tend to mostly just get in the way when you're doing a side view. Unless you're doing a 2D animation directly with these, like these are sprites in an animation, I wouldn't include the arms unless there's a design on the arm that you really need to have visible. I wouldn't do it. And you can also, you know, this is just a reference for you, so you can kind of just do a side view of the arm off to the side. But when you do the arm, unless you have it in a full T-pose, because then honestly, you're not going to see the arms at all anyway. You're just going to kind of see the tips of the fingers. It's just going to get in the way of like seeing what's on the side, like seeing what's on the dress that we're working on here. And then you'll see here I'm going in just adding details. Now, one thing you might notice while you're working, and then you can see here, oh, I just wanted to point this out. So when I wanted the other side of her, all I ended up doing was just copying it and then flipping it horizontally because she is symmetrical on each side. But then because I have this pocket on the left-hand side, I did just add a pocket on the side over here. Obviously, if you have a character that's much different on each side, go ahead and still do this symmetry tool and then just make whatever changes you need to between them. Okay. And I know that I was getting on a train of thought. Oh, so if you notice when you bring your references into Blender to start working on them, that things are not lined up, that's totally fine. This is mostly just so that you can get a starting point and a reference point. If things are not perfect, that's totally fine. So I kind of notice here that like my nose might end slightly lower here than here, or maybe the middle of my mouth is here instead of down here. It's things that can be adjusted in the program. I usually will make a whole section from the front facing and then go in and adjust it with the side. And then I'll go back to the front and realize, oh, some things were off. So I'll go and move things around a little bit. And it's just kind of that back and forth until things are looking the way you want them to. And I'm going to let it keep playing here. So what I did up here is I actually took a bunch of my reference photos from Pinterest that I really liked the colors on, and I just put them into like a color picker and kind of like picked a bunch of colors from it. And I made a little color palette here. You can go more minimal or you can go even more colors. What I did when I was picking these colors, and I'm not sure if it's going to be easy to see. I'm not sure if it shows up. But basically, I take all of the colors and these are all the colors I want. And then I add a color on top of it. Like I just add like a light brown over everything and just make them all a little bit closer to each other, just so the colors go together. So if you have a larger color palette, if you add a color that brings them all together, it's definitely very helpful. And obviously if you exclude like the blue from here, these colors all kind of go together. They're all in that orange, brown, red category. That light brown is a little bit more cold of a color, so it kind of bounces off some of the other colors. But that the light brown and the blue kind of like combat the super warm colors and actually make some of the cooler browns look warmer because they're such cold colors. So kind of balancing the different colors, having complementary colors with each other is super helpful. And you don't have to make something look like, oh, this is just two complementary colors together. You know, it doesn't have to be super like Christmassy if it's red and green. You can definitely work with reds and greens in a way that looks really nice. You know, if you think about something like cranberries, you know, they're going to have that rich red color, but then they also have sort of a foresty green. And like here, I've got this blue, but I've also got an orange right next to it. But they don't look crazy next to each other. You know, they kind of meld together. So here you'll see me kind of color blocking things. I'm just kind of putting colors down. I did end up pretty much keeping, I think, the organization of most of these colors. but you may want to make a couple different versions. So take your character. I just did it on the front view because I felt like it was the only one that really needed that color reference. There's no colors that are going to change on the back at all. The bow that is visible in the back is going to be the same as the thing in the front, so there's no problem. So I'm going to let it kind of go, and you'll see me kind of refining the colors, and you'll see me starting to be like, oh, I'm not really sure if I like how cold her skin tone looked, because it was a little bit too much against all of the other colors. So I start, evening things out and bringing all the colors together. I add a little bit of texture to these. And I ended up taking off the makeup that I put on her. It just wasn't working with her. But you don't have to do a ton of like details and texture in the way that I do. I actually kind of just gesture most of these patterns here. So the stripes on the top, I actually may not have stripes. I may have some other pattern, like a paisley or something, but you don't have to go in and add that now. That's something we can, work on when we're doing the texturing. And then this little pocket right here, I want it to be plaid. I did not make a perfect plaid. I just kind of put some lines down. And it's just because I want to see where the colors are going to be and how they are going to distribute. And you'll see here I added that white tone, that like really light beige color, because I didn't want a pure white in anything that she's doing, because she's a very like muted, natural toned character. So I want to make sure I don't have any stark black or stark white in her design, just because it's not something I wanted to do. But yeah, you'll see here that I finished up. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the turnaround. If you would like to continue on and put the colors on the sides and back, that's totally fine. If it's, something where maybe they have like a jacket on that then has like some kind of graphic on the back that's going to have color, then yeah, definitely go for that. So another thing to think about when you're thinking about your design is what you're going to use it for. Again, I kind of talked about that in the beginning. So this here, I'm putting these colors down. If you are going to have this character be something that you just want to take pictures in Blender and have like art of them, like just have renders of this character, or if you want to animate it, or if you want to have it be your avatar in like a VR chat or something like that, or have it be a VTuber character, then you are going to have to texture it and put the colors on it. If you're going to be 3D printing it, there's not really any purpose to texturing it. You can do that if you'd like, just to practice, but if you're just going to 3D print it, these colors are just going to be referenced for when you paint it, which, you won't have to go into detail on anything if you don't want to. You can just kind of freehand it when you get to the painting portion. Okay, all right, so this is the turnaround section. And now let me see if I can get to the next one. And here's a kind of reference that I have here. So this is what I end up pulling into Blender when I get started. And I like to have the color version in there, but it's not super important to have the color until you start getting into the texturing, unless there's something where you want to indicate that something is deeper in or something like that. Like if these dots or something that were on the mushroom had more like texture, then maybe I would want to have the colored version in Blender. But you can also just import just the black and white, because it's going to be a lot easier to see, and I'll kind of show that in a second because we're doing good on time. So I should be able to kind of just hop into Blender to show you like the first step of what we'll talk about next week. But real quick, the tips and tricks that I had mentioned a couple times, the silhouette, shape, and simplify. So silhouette is what I was talking about of, you can tell who these characters are. Even if they were T-posing, I'm sure that you could tell who they were, but especially because of the poses that they're doing. This is Mickey Mouse, Bart Simpson, Mr. Krabs, and then my character. Because I kind of wanted to show how having those very specific shapes in specific areas is super helpful for identifying who they are, and it makes them a more iconic character. Now, obviously, you don't have to have the most unique and iconic character just to make a character, but sometimes it's, you know, it's nice to have that in the back of your head, just to kind of think of, you know, how can I make this character really good? How can I make them really well? Okay, and then we've got shape in the middle here, which I know this is going to be really hard to see. I'm just going to kind of read out the details on it, but it's talking about circles, triangles, and squares. This person is saying, you know, the more sides you end up adding, it just, once you've passed square, it just starts turning into a circle. I would say that's pretty true, because they kind of even reference, like, if you're thinking, oh, what if it's like a rhombus where it's straight, you know, like this, and then like the house shape. Well, that's really just a square and a triangle at that point. So once you get past those three simple shapes, they start just being combinations of shapes. So hers, I actually did a lot of circles and triangles. And so you'll see here the soft and friendly is kind of what you get with the circle. So I was wanting her to look like kind of like young and soft and friendly. But then the triangles, they say it's sharp or dangerous or active. I think of it more as like the active part, you know, it's very like adventurous. So she's not just like a completely flat character of just being round. She's also got some like sharp edges to her, which is really interesting. One thing I really didn't use was the square, but you'll kind of see here, like if it's just a square, oh, this is very stable character. So if you think about like the old man from Up, he has a very square head. Like his jaw is very square and the top of his head is very square, even his nose is kind of like a rectangle. And you think of him as very stubborn and very like put in his ways and sharp, like just not sharp in like a jabbing way, but sharp in a very like secure, don't want to do anything that's not something I want to do, you know? And you'll see when it's talking about like Mr. Incredible, it's friendly and stable. So he would be the strong good guy, you know? So that makes sense. And then simplify. So it's really easy to make things too detailed when you're doing a character, especially if it's your first one, because you're like, oh, I just want to put all of these things that I love into this character and make them super fun and unique. And you absolutely can. But it's going to get hard to add all of those details that you want to do. So I recommend, especially for your first time around, doing something that's a little bit more simple. You can always add more later. And obviously, I'm not necessarily talking about like having like props or anything. You can also add as many props as you want. But having a more cartoony, like a cartoony shaped character is definitely going to be a whole lot easier. It's going to print a lot better. It's going to take up a lot less memory on your computer. It's going to be easier to model with simple shapes. But this character looks very interesting, and I understand like the idea of this character just from looking at it. So this is not mine. This is just one from Pinterest, like on the boards that I was looking at. But she's kind of got the same thing of like she's very soft and round, but she's got some sharper points to her, which is really cool. And I feel like I get who this character is. Okay, so those are the kind of the tips and tricks. So I'm going to really quickly, probably just for the next like 5 minutes or so, go into Blender and just show what the next step is. You do not have to do this next step. It's just for kind of like giving you an idea of where we're going. So I need to switch my screen sharing really quick. Going to stop the share and then open up Blender and share it again. Oh no, I don't think it's gonna let me do what I want to do. That's okay. I am just going to share my entire screen, so hopefully that goes well. Okay. So that's gonna probably be showing Zoom right now. Hopefully this is showing Blender, fingers crossed. Let me see if that's what it looks like. I'm not sure if Dylan is able to see right now, but if he...
It's showing, Blender, you're good.
Okay, cool. I was like, I just want to make sure before I'm, just talking about nothing for a couple minutes. Okay, so when you get into Blender, you will see it's lots of buttons everywhere. It is very overwhelming. I remember the first time I opened the program, I just didn't do the assignment I was supposed to because I was too scared. So it's definitely something you kind of have to ease yourself into. So your splash screen might look a little bit different. This art piece here might be different depending on when you downloaded it. This is 2.93. I think the newest is 3.3 something. They update pretty regularly. There hasn't been a super big update since 2.8. When they changed from 2.7 to 2.8, they changed a ton of stuff. But little differences in between this shouldn't affect us at all. And especially just for what I'm showing you really quick. So when you get in here, you can just click anywhere on the material plane or the plane here. There's a couple different things you can do right away. You can kind of use this gizmo up in the right-hand corner to move. I'm going to just click on one of these buttons and it'll kind of spin to show that side. So I'm just going to get a flat view right now, because whatever view you have is the view that the picture that you can reference in here is going to be at. So if you're at a weird angle and you import it, it's going to be flat to you, but it's going to be at a weird angle. So I'm going to keep it at a flat angle right now. And I'm going to click add, which this is this menu right up here, and then image and reference. So I'm not sure where I have, okay, so I have it right here, reference. So you'll see now you've got this in here. And for next session, I am going to have in the bottom left-hand corner, I'm going to have the keys that I'm pressing turned on, so it'll show you what keys I'm pressing as I'm pressing them. I'll also be verbally saying them, but that'll just help people kind of be able, when they're watching it back, see what's going on. But for right now, I'm just going to tell you what I'm doing. So I just want to size this up. Actually, I could probably just zoom in and we'll just leave it the way it is right now. So zooming in, I just do it with the scroll wheel on a mouse. If you're on a laptop, you can zoom in, I think, just by like 2 fingers going up and down on the trackpad. Also, if you can't figure either of those out, if you click and hold on this zoom button and just move your mouse up and down, it'll go up and down, or it'll go in and out. So obviously, this is not very helpful right now. We can't really see it while we're working. So what I would do when I get into that next step of wanting to use this as a reference, I go down to this right here, which is the object data properties. I just usually reference it as the little picture. It looks like a little picture frame, so that's what I click. And it'll show here some information about this image. So what I want is I want the depth to be front, so it's always going to show in front of the object. So it doesn't matter that it is actually in the middle of this object. It doesn't even matter if I move this and it's all the way behind the object. It's going to still show it in front of it. And I want to turn on opacity and turn it down. So now I can see my sketch, but work with my model here. And I can move these around and, match them up. And again, we'll talk about all this next time. But this is just like a nice way to see it. And you'll also see that's kind of why I like the black and white, just a sketch versus the color, because the color starts to get a little bit muddy when it's up against the gray of the background in Blender, whereas the black and white is much easier to see. So I would suggest definitely saving both versions, having just a black and white version and having a colored version. If you're going to be doing it on paper, just go ahead and like scan in or take a picture of your image in just the sketch version, just the black and white or just the pen version, and then you can take another picture or scan it when it has the color on it so that you have both to work with. Another thing you'll notice while we're working here is I can click on either one of these, but they're both in the same way. And sometimes this is in the way, and I don't want to accidentally click on it. So we can go up to this right-hand corner here and click on the filter. And then we'll click on selectable. I don't know why they don't turn this on by default. It's very useful, and I had to look for it the first time I was in here. But basically, it just makes it so this layer is locked now. I can't click on it no matter what I do, and if I click right here, it's only ever going to give me the square. So I'll usually bring in my reference and make it so that it does not affect anything. I'll make it not selectable, and I'll bring that up again next time. But if you want to get into Blender and just mess around, and if you have any experience with Blender, or if you feel like watching any videos on YouTube, you know, you can go in and start modeling and doing all that stuff, feel free. But I'm going to show you guys how to get started in all of that modeling, and then also how to do a little bit in the sculpting tab next session. Next session is going to be a lot more intensive, and we will probably go all the way up to the last second of the hour. The only thing that you need for next session is just have a drawing ready. I will be sending out, though, everyone who is signed up for the next session, I will be sending them out my reference. So if you want to just work on modeling, you can model this character. And then that continues on for the next couple sessions. So if they just want to work on the texturing that we're going to do, or just want to work on the making props or anything like that we're going to do, I will give my content from the previous session to anybody who hasn't caught up. But also, there's 2 weeks in between each, so if you do want to catch up and you didn't have time like right away, feel free to take your time. And I am pretty much done in Blender here, so I'm not going to save it. And I'll stop my share. So that's pretty much everything I have for you guys today. And I know I showed it for a second there at the end, but I showed the CEXP email and then my personal work email. I will go ahead and type those in the chat really quick. And this is for anyone that has any questions about the program or about 3D printing in general, just anything. You can always shoot us an email or give us a call. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for the making a reference today. So if you want to work on getting the reference done, feel free to take your time and play around with it. And then we will be meeting again on, I believe, November 2nd. Same time from 6 to 7. And I'll be sending out an email. It may be a little bit more than a week because I know I'm going to be out the next couple days, but I will be sending out a copy of this recording before the next session, so that anyone who either missed it or anyone who just wants to go back and see extra stuff can do so. All right, and if anyone has any questions, we have a couple minutes left. Otherwise, you guys are free to go, and I'm hoping to see you guys next time.